Welcome everybody to my YouTube channel. I hope everyone is having a great start to the new year. Today I'm going to teach you guys how to do this really cool, sexy title effect using 3D camera tracking. Anyway, so we're going to go ahead and open up our project here in DaVinci Resolve Studio and go ahead and get started there. Now, I use DaVinci Resolve Studio for all of my editing and post-processing and audio mastering. Basically does everything I need it to do. Okay, so we're inside of DaVinci Resolve now, and as you can see, I have my timeline right here and all our clips right here. These are all 60 frames per second on a DJI Mavic Pro, and we're in a 24 FPS timeline. So I have everything ready here. One thing to note before we jump into Fusion is I applied a color grade before I went into Fusion. If I didn't, I would have applied my color grade on top of any of the effects I did in Fusion, so I just did do my color grading before. So when I go into Fusion, it'll be color graded, and all I have to do is add my effects. So with that, I can just jump over here to the timeline again, and go to the beginning of our clip here, have it selected, and go into Fusion. And as you can see, we have the Fusion interface. Now, normally this is the point in Final Cut Pro or Adobe Premiere where you have to export to another program like After Effects and to do all your fancy effects that you want to do. Since I'm using DaVinci Resolve, Fusion is built into the studio and I don't have to do any exporting whatsoever. I do everything I need to in this one program, and that's one of the cool features I love about this, is that I can do all my audio mastering, color grading, VFX, editing, all in the same program, never having to export. Now, Fusion is a standalone application. If you're using Final Cut Pro, you can export to Fusion, and then you'll have to re-import back into it, just like you would anything else. So what do we have happening here? Fusion is a node-based compositing, meaning unlike After Effects, which uses layers, I guess you could say, Fusion does things using nodes, and node-based compositing allows you to get a really good visual of what is going on in your scene, and basically every single effect you apply is a node. So right here we have two nodes. One is our input node, which let me display in the viewer here, which is our clip here, and then this is our output node right here. And nothing's happening, there's no change, they are the same. So each of these little black dots dictates what viewer these nodes get displayed in. So there's no changes happening, they're the same. So what I want to do is come over here to our effects library, look under tools, and these are where all our nodes are. All the effects, everything. And all the nodes are pretty simple by themselves, but when you use them together, you can achieve some really amazing things. So I'm going to come over here to the tracking menu here, and I want to add a camera tracker, but I want to select media in and then add it. So it automatically connects it in between our media in and media out. With that, we're going to go ahead and adjust our settings here, but before I do that, I want to display our camera tracker in our viewer, so I'll click on that right black dot, and again, no changes are happening, but we are viewing the effects happening in this node, and this basically views all the changes up to that node, nothing past. So we'll go ahead and close our effects library and increase the size here a little bit, and what I'm going to do here is go ahead and preview auto track location, check that box. Now, all of our nodes we add, all the setting, whatever one we have highlighted, the settings for it are going to be in this panel here on the right. So as you can see, we just clicked preview auto track locations, and that basically told Fusion to show us what it wants to track. Now, what we want to do is we want to extrapolate the camera movement, and the way to do that is by tracking fixed points in space. So we're not going to get accurate results if we track something that moves, like the water. So we want to avoid that. So what I want to do is add a mask and plug it into this camera tracker. And you can see here, we have a little input here called track mask. And if I have our camera tracker selected, I can come up here to the shortcut menu and click on our polygon mask, and it automatically plugs it in. And I will put it in the left-sided viewer here. And then I will build a mask, just point and click all around. We'll just adjust some of these points to be a little closer to the water, or the edge of the water. I don't want to get too close because I still want to pull the detail out of the edges there, but I think we're okay right there. So we'll go ahead and fit there, and I'll click on our camera tracker node. And as you can see, we're tracking everything inside of that mask and not on the outside. So I want to come back to our mask and invert it. And then we'll go back here, and now we're doing what we should be doing and tracking everything outside of there. So in our camera tracking node settings, we can adjust the minimum feature set, which is going to basically tell Fusion how far apart each tracker is going to be from each other. So I'm going to go ahead and lower this to, we'll go down to, no, too low. About right there. So we're going to have much more trackers in here. And our detection threshold basically says how much contrast something has to have before Fusion decides it needs to be tracked. So if we wanted to, we can go ahead and track any of these red, green, or blue or Luma channels. If one has certain contrast over the other, you would probably want to prefer that, because the better contrast you get, the better of a track you'll get. I think all our settings right here are okay. There's some more advanced settings in here, such as tracking pattern size and determining how these trackers function, but I think we're going to leave it at the defaults right now. And I'm going to go ahead and save this real quick, and I want to click auto track. So what we're doing is tracking all of these points that Fusion detects, and it's going to track everything going forward, and it's then going to track everything going backwards. Okay, so you notice that it just started tracking everything going backwards now. And the reason it does that is because perhaps at a certain frame, Fusion lost a tracker, and so it looks for a new tracking point. And if it finds one, it's going to track everything going forward. But it's certainly possible that that tracking point could have existed before it detected it. So it's going to go and run it backwards and see if it can't pull out more data for certain trackers. Okay, so I just finished our camera track, and we're going to go over to our camera tab, and basically we want to be able to tell Fusion what it needs to refine. So these were shot on a DJI Mavic Pro, and I'm pretty sure it's, the lens on that is at 35 millimeters equivalent. So we're just going to go ahead and leave that as is, but we'll tell it to refine the focal length anyway. So we'll leave all these settings as is, but if you had to, you can come in and tell Fusion, or tell our camera tracker what kind of distortion we have or what our focal length is, but we'll go ahead and leave things as they are. So we'll come over here to our Solve tab, and I'm going to go ahead and click on Solve, or I'm going to save first, and then I'm going to click on Solve. And what this is going to do is this is going to weigh all the trackers against each other, and we're going to find out what trackers are accurate and which ones are bad. And we want to be able to sort them out from each other, because bad trackers are going to give us a bad result, good trackers are going to give us a good result. And like you could see, some of these trackers that still made it on the water here, they're probably not going to give us good results here. So we may have to delete them and resolve our trackers again. So we'll see what happens here. I'm going to go ahead and let this run through. It may seem like your computer's locked up on you, but trust me, it's thinking hard as it can, because it has to measure all of these against each other. So I'll go ahead and let this finish up, and we'll get back to it once it's done. Okay, so I went ahead and retracked again, and I got my solve error down to 0.5. Now that's actually pretty good, considering, if our goal was 0.3 and we're still under 1. I would say this is good enough. I don't need to tinker with this anymore. We're looking pretty good. So what I want to do now is I want to come over here to the next tab called Export, and I'm going to go ahead and click on Export. And what this is going to do is going to add a bunch more nodes over here. And if I bring them up here so we can have everything in view, what this did, when I clicked Export, it basically said, all right, take all the information you have and now create it in a 3D environment. And that's exactly what it did. So if I come over here and view this merge node, and change the camera perspective, we have a 3D environment of our scene. And as you can see, the trackers have been put along the tree line, and it has tracked all the details pretty well, I'd have to say. So you can see we have the tree line on either side, the river down the middle, and this green line is basically the path the camera takes. So we can see as we jump from frame to frame, the camera moves around. So what we're gonna do here is we're gonna go ahead and do some, this is where the fun starts. So we'll go back to the first frame. What I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna go ahead and save real quick, lest it crashes again. I'm gonna go ahead and save this real quick, and just in case it crashes. But we have our 3D environment now. So we'll break down these nodes and I'll show you what they look like now. So we have our 3D camera node, and if I put the viewer on there, we see the camera. We can also view the point trackers. I can also look at the ground plane. Now, you might need the ground plane, you might not. I don't care for it in this situation, but we see we have all these individual nodes here. So we have our camera, point clouds, and ground plane, and they all feed into this merge, which is basically everything combined. And then this merge node is then fed into this render node. And that basically, what the render node does is it basically says, all right, everything in this 3D environment, we are now converting it to a 2D image based off of how this environment is set up. So we have our camera, we have our trackers, we have the camera movement. It's all being converted into a 2D image. So if I go ahead and select the viewer here for the render node, nothing happens because the trackers are set to be invisible. The ground plane typically is not. So we want to go ahead and uncheck visible because I don't want to see it in my final project, but we'll go ahead and leave that. You know, this is what I was saying, how nodes offer a great visual as to see how your scene is composed. Now, one thing to note here is our media in node right here is being fed into our camera. So as you can see in our 3D environment, the background of our 3D scene is going to be our media clip. So what I want to do now is I want to add our 3D text. So rather than going over here to the effects pool, what I want to do is I want to do shift space, and I can type in text, and there it is, text 3D. That's the one we want. So real quick, I'm going to unselect this because there we go. Okay, so we'll go ahead and add it. Typically, when you have a node selected and then you add one, it will connect them up how it thinks it wants you to connect them up, but sometimes it's not the best. So we have our text node. Now, if I come over here to the viewer and take a look at this, we can type in this box and we'll just say fusion, I guess. So there's our 3D text. And now we want to just drag and drop into this merge node. And the way this merge node works is we can connect as many 3D things as we want to it. There's no limit, really. We can just keep going. And if we get too many, we can then merge, we can drag that merge node into another merge node and just keep connecting things and so on. But we're okay right now. So we can see our fusion text. We want to move that down here a little bit. Let's enable the environment. There we go. So now we have our text in our 3D environment, which is very oversized. So we'll go ahead and shrink our text down. Something a little more manageable. Yeah, let's move it right about there. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and right click, go to camera, change perspective, front. And as we can see, based off of our tracking data, the water level, the lowest trackers are gonna be about where the water level is at, and that's gonna be about right across here. So I want this text to be just above the water. So we'll go ahead and drag our text like so. Yeah, that's good. Might increase the size just a bit, just for dramatic effect. Okay, so that's pretty good. We have our text positioned, and now when we can go over to perspective, and we jump through the frames, we can see our text changes according to our 3D scene based off of our media in. And what I want to do now is go ahead and disconnect the media out from our camera tracker because we don't really need that anymore. I'm going to go ahead and drag our render node into our output node. And that's pretty much it. That is all there is to this. And if I come back here to our edit node, we now have this little icon in the bottom corner here, and you can see that this red bar, and basically Resolve detects that there's been changes inside of Fusion, so it's going into Fusion, rendering that out, and putting it in our timeline for us. Okay, so we got our clip rendered out, and we go ahead and play it. We have the data tracked inside of our clip, which is pretty cool. We have some issues though. We see that our text just kind of vanishes right there at that frame. So what I want to do is go back into Fusion, and I want to go to our 3D camera, and we have it, all the settings are locked on it. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that little lock right there. And I want to set the clip distance to 0, but it doesn't go all the way down to 0. So we'll set it pretty short right there to 0.05. And that should allow us to go a bit closer. Yeah, so we can get a decent fly-through effect with that. So that's pretty much all we have to do. We could call this done, but I want to add a little more depth to this, and we'll go ahead and give it some reflection on the water. Now, I experimented around with a couple ways to do this, and it can get as complicated as you want, or it can be as simple as you want. So we have to fake a reflection. So the easiest way for this purpose that I found was we'll go ahead and disconnect our media in here, and I'll tell you guys why in a minute. But right now, everything that basically gives our background an alpha channel now. And I'll go ahead and move our 3D camera right there. And I'm going to add a transform node, and a 3D transform node anyway. So we'll go ahead and add that. And what I want to do now is come in here to our location settings and reset them, because when you adjust the location settings in here and then do the same thing in the transform node, weird things happen. So we want to keep the object itself at values at 0, and we want to go into our transform node and only adjust that. So all I have to do is come back here, and then I have to realign it here real quick. We'll go ahead and do that. There we go. And as we can see, our transform node is the output of that is being fed back into our merge node. And I'm going to go ahead and move these around so we can see things a little bit easier. So, okay. So to fake this reflection, we kind of have to work around it and create another 3D scene using the same tools here. So what I want to do is I want to add a 3D merge, and I want to feed my 3D camera into it, which is why we disconnected the media in from the camera. Otherwise we wouldn't have alpha channels, because we're going to be compositing everything in after it's rendered. I'm going to go ahead and Control-C, Control-V that transform node again, and we're going to do the same thing with our 3D text. And now we're going to feed it into this merge here. As we can see, the data is now applied here. So what we have going on here is we have two 3D scenes happening. This one is going to be just our regular Fusion that we want, and this bottom one down here is going to be our reflection. And I know these looks a little bit confusing, but we're basically splitting the text and the camera data to create two different Fusion titles. And we're going to flip one upside down using this transform here. I'm going to go over here to our X rotation and put it to 180 degrees rotation. I also want to again add a render node, and that's just gonna render this out. Okay, so now our viewers are looking at our Fusion title here, and we're looking at the bottom one, which is flipped upside down for our reflection, or what's going to be our reflection. It looks awful right now. So we need to adjust this just a bit. Let's go ahead and go to camera perspective front, and I want to do the same on this one too, so we can really get the details refined here. Lower this just a bit right there and give it a little distance from the other reflection here. And I think we're good there. So we have our render node. Now we need to add a regular merge node. The regular merge node is very different than the 3D merge. The 3D merge allows you to attach as many things as you want to it. The 2D merge only allows you to attach a foreground, a background, and a mask. It's like, think of it like Photoshop layers. It's just a way of doing that. And based off of the operations performed in this panel, you can achieve that in different ways. Fusion title is our background, but we want that as the foreground. So we'll plug that into the foreground, take our media in, plug it into the background, and if I put this in the viewer, we have it composited as it was before. Now we need to composite our reflection in. So I'm gonna go ahead and add another merge node. I'm gonna go ahead and add that in. And what we wanna do is put this image into the foreground. All I have to do to do that is plug that into the foreground, and when I view that, we have a very terrible looking reflection. So we need to fix that. So I want to come back, select this render node here again, do shift space, and I want to add a blur. And I really like fast Gaussian blur, so I'm going to go ahead and leave it at that. And we'll just blur this, yeah, about like that. Still looks terrible. So I want to come over here to our second merge, and this is what we're going to do. We're going to take our apply mode, and we're going to change it to overlay. And what that does is it basically takes the luminance of the background and uses it as a mask for the foreground. So we can really get the ripples through the water. And now we're starting to look like something. We can adjust the blend and the gain to get a more controlled environment and get it to what we want it to look like. But I was actually pretty happy with just using soft light. It basically does the same thing, it's just different settings, and that's pretty much all you have to do. It's being fed into our media out, so it's being rendered. We can come back to our edit page, and again, Fusion has changes to it. DaVinci Resolve detects that, and so it's going to re-render this clip out on our timeline again. So DaVinci Resolve detected the changes again in Fusion and re-rendered out our clip on our timeline. I went ahead and saved again, and when we play our clip, it's not perfect, but it's actually pretty good. We could go in and refine it more, but I think you guys get the idea of what's happening and how it works. So if we go back into Fusion here to recap, all we're doing is we're taking our text node and our camera node. All we're doing is we're splitting the Fusion title into two different rendered images, and one is being flipped upside down and blurred and recomposited over the other, and that just kind of gives us our reflection. It's not 100% physically accurate, but it's pretty convincing if you ask me. So if we come back into our edit page, Resolve detected the changes in Fusion and re-rendered the clip on our timeline, and if we play it, we have a pretty good playback here of our title, camera flyby with reflections in the water. So that pretty much wraps up this tutorial. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I hope you guys have a great day and hope you enjoyed this video. Hopefully I can plan on doing a bit more, and I will see you guys in the next video. I hope you enjoyed it. Bye.